All rise. Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. This Honorable Superior Court Special Decision for the County of Wake is now convened and sitting for the regular dispatch of business. Honorable Judge Michael R. Morgan, President presiding. Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. God save the state and Honorable Court. Please be seated and remain quiet. Good afternoon, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Deputy. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Welcome all to this special session of Wake County Superior Court, which is being conducted to remember and to celebrate the lives of Wake County attorneys who have passed away during the course of the last 6 months. I'm honored that Senior Resident Superior Court Judge Donald Stevens has designated me to preside over this very purposeful session of court. I want to recognize and to introduce at this time, to say words as they see fit on this auspicious occasion, the respective presidents of our 10th Judicial District Bar and the Wake County Bar Association. Douglas J. Brocker, President of the 10th Judicial District Bar, and E.D. Gaskins Jr., President of the Wake County Bar Association, who will say some words at this time concerning the occasion. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Your Honor. Want to welcome all of you here on behalf of the 10th Judicial District Bar. The Memorial Service Committee is a committee of the 10th Judicial District, and we have a number of committee members who are listed in the bulletin who work very hard on these services to put them together and really make them what I consider to be one of the real jewels of the 10th Judicial District, and the things that we do best is to honor the members who have come before us and who have had very successful careers and lives. And I always look forward to these ceremonies and learn a lot of things about people, some of whom I knew and some of whom I didn't know, that I never was aware of before. I appreciate all of you being here, and I appreciate Clark Brewer, who has just recently taken over as the chair of this committee. He served on it for many years, and I appreciate his willingness to do that. It is a fairly substantial amount of work, and it's becoming more and more work, unfortunately, as a lot of our members have gotten older and we've become a much larger bar. We've gone to two services a year, and we may quickly have to go to more than that, but they're always done very well, and we like to keep the number of honorees limited so that we can really focus on them. I want to make one brief comment or remark. Being a memorial service, I can't help but think of somebody who would not technically be eligible to be memorialized in one of these services because he was not an attorney, but we've just recently lost Don Jones, who was the Director of Investigations for the State Bar for many years. He was just an outstanding person, an outstanding director. He was precisely the kind of person who you would want to be in that kind of position, someone who always was very professional and polite with all the attorneys who came into contact, usually under not very pleasant circumstances, but he always did an excellent job. He worked with the SBI and the Department of Revenue before coming to the State Bar for 20 years, and he just recently passed away in October. So I think of him in part today because we had our annual grievance committee meeting where the State Bar came to visit, and it's usually Root and Don, and this was the first year I've been involved in. Of course, Don was not there. So we will miss him. I look forward to the remarks of the honorees who are here, and I appreciate all of you coming. Thanks.
This is actually the last official duty that Doug and I have, and it certainly could not be a higher honor than to finish our tenure and by being permitted to attend this service and to say things on behalf of the 10th Judicial District and the Wake County Bar. We hope you'll find this a meaningful service. It has been every time I've attended. And in part, it's because it's helped me put into context the the life of the attorneys that I've worked with. And I think those of you who are not attorneys might find that it helps you put into context the life of your loved one in the sense of what he or she did professionally. I never fail to be amazed and in fact awed when I find out about attorneys I've known only professionally, and I find out about the rest of their lives. And likewise, I think you family members will find it meaningful to understand what the life of your loved one was in the context of the profession in which he or she served. So once again, it's our privilege to be able to do this. I look forward to it. I hope you find it meaningful.
President Brocker and President Gaskins, thank you for your outstanding leadership on behalf of these great respected bar organizations in sponsoring and organizing this very special ceremony and program that we have today. I also want to recognize the presence of my fellow elected official who serves here in the courthouse, our elected clerk, Lauren Freeman. Also recognize any other elected officials or judicial colleagues who are here or may be on the way, as it is a busy day in the courthouse today. A particularly heartfelt welcome is extended to the family members and loved ones of those whom we remember today. We thank them for adding a significant quality to this program with their presence. Indeed, while our colleagues in the legal profession have gone on to their eternal reward, they are not forgotten by those of us still fortunate to be here. We treasure them, the memories which they left us, and the manner in which they indelibly touched our lives. During this busy though meaningful time of year, we pause today to pay tribute to each of these fallen members of our legal family through memorial presentations to be made as we recall and honor each of them individually. During this program, we may find ourselves cheerful, even laughing. We may find ourselves mournful, even crying. Such is life, such is memories. Such is the passion that we have for our friends as we remember them today. At this time, the court recognizes the chair of the Memorials Committee, Clark Brewer, who will continue the program at this time.
First thing I need to do is to apologize to the judge. As much as we check the program, we sometimes make mistakes, and we try not to make mistakes when it has to do with the judge who is presiding. But we left off an L, and he has graciously forgiven me. He said it was something he understood, and it was okay with him as long as it was okay with his mother. So I'm hoping it's going to be okay with his mother. Sheriff Donnie Harrison would normally be here and couldn't make it today, and I just wanted to send his regrets for not being able to be here today. The first tribute we're going to be doing is for Judge David M. Britt. The presentation will be by Clifford Britt, and he's the son of Judge Britt. And Cliff got his Bachelor of Arts, Master's of Business, and his law degree all from Wake Forest. He began his practice in Winston-Salem with the law firm of Petrie Stockton. He now has his own firm, and he was a co-founder of that, and that's Comerford and Britt. That's located in Winston-Salem.
May it please the court. My name is Cliff Britt, and I practice law in Winston-Salem. I am honored to be able to speak to you today about Justice David Maxwell Britt, who passed away in May, As you may know, my father, Judge Earl Britt, and Justice David Britt were brothers, separated by 16 years. I knew him as Uncle David, and so I'm going to talk about him that way. There were two other brothers in that family of 7 children who also became lawyers, my Uncle N.L. Britt and my Uncle Dud Britt. All 4 of them received part of their education at Wake Forest, but it was Uncle David who led the way. He was first, he was the oldest. It was up to him to set the example, and by all measures he did. The world doesn't seem to have many heroes or role models these days, but I've got to tell you that my Uncle David was my hero. My Uncle David was really the first in our family to get a higher education. When he graduated high school, it was in the midst of the Great Depression. He had the courage to leave the family farm in McDonald, which is in rural Robertson County, down near the South Carolina border. And he attended Wake Forest College, which was a fairly long way from home. Realizing that there were 6 other children to come after him, he applied himself diligently. He worked extra jobs to help pay for the cost of tuition, the cost of room and board, and he spent every summer in school while he was there. That allowed him to go straight on to law school. And by the summer of 1937, at age 20, he only needed a few classes to graduate law school. But because his sister Miriam had been patiently waiting back home on the family farm for her turn to go to school, he unselfishly decided not to finish. Instead, he came back home and immediately put all of that hard education to work as a bag boy in a grocery store in Fairmont. He later said that delivering groceries allowed him to meet and get to know people in Fairmont and get to know people who would be his clients down the road. It sort of reminds me of George Bailey at Bedford Falls in the movie It's a Wonderful Life that you might have seen around Thanksgiving. Well, he held down that job for 5 months until his 21st birthday in January of 1938. He was then eligible to apply for his license to practice law. And in that very humble and modest way, thus began the legal career of Justice David Maxwell Britt. Now, many of you may know that my uncle practiced law in Robeson County for almost 30 years. During that time, he was very active locally. He provided a broad range of legal services to the community and to individual clients there. He was chairman of the Fairmont Board of Education. He served in the North Carolina House of Representatives for almost 10 years. He was elected as Speaker of the House of Representatives in the 1967 General Assembly. And during his legislative tenure, he devoted himself to work. A few of the things that he did. He served as chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, chairman of the Committee on the Courts. He was a member of the Advisory Budget Commission. In between sessions of the legislature, he served on the General Statutes Commission, the Commission on Reorganization of State Government, the Courts Commission, as well as chairman of the Speaker Band Study Law Commission. And he was the primary architect of the court system as we know it today. In 1967, he was appointed by Governor Dan Moore to serve as one of the 6 original judges on the newly created Court of Appeals, and he served there 11 years until 1978, when he was elected to succeed Justice I. Beverly Lake as Justice on the Supreme Court. And he served on that court until age 65 when he retired in 1982. Beyond law, a lifelong Baptist, he was very active as a Sunday school teacher and as a deacon of churches that he belonged to in Fairmont and in Raleigh where he lived. He served for 20 years as the chairman of the Board of Trustees of the North Carolina State Baptist State Convention. 3 years as trustee of Wake Forest University. 15 years as trustee of Meredith College, and 12 years as trustee of Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. In 1969, Wake Forest conferred upon him an honorary degree, Doctor of Laws, and in 2000 he received the same honor from Campbell University. He was in the Rotary Club for over 60 years. He was very active in the North Carolina Bar Association. He served on the Board of Governors and later as a vice president of that organization. And they presented him with its highest award, the Judge John J. Parker Award, quote, in recognition of conspicuous service to the cause of jurisprudence in North Carolina. And lastly, it was only 4 years ago that he received in this building the Professionalism Award from the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism. A true citizen lawyer, my uncle was a role model to my father, to me, and to countless others that knew him throughout the community and throughout the legal community. He was almost larger than life to me, really. Through his determination and courage, he paved the way and showed us what we lawyers could become if we applied ourselves diligently and devoted ourselves to justice. He served a great example in every community and organization that he was part of. Even after he was promoted, appointed, and elected to some of the highest offices in the state, he remained very involved in Robeson County. He attended every single one of our family reunions that we had, that we still do have in our tiny community of McDonald, where he was born. He was our patriarch, and we all looked up to him. There are few who have dedicated themselves to the area's history more than him. He dedicated his entire life to the law and to public service. He excelled at everything that he did, but somehow did it in a way without sacrificing his morals and his inner core values that his parents instilled upon him when he was growing up. And despite his stature, he remained humble. He was always a gentleman and somehow able to communicate with his constituents while serving in the legislature, and at the same time able to communicate with the governor and the leaders of the state about what needed to be done to improve our court system and to ensure justice. He spent his life dedicated to the law and to the justice system in North Carolina, and we are all better off because he did. A life well spent. Justice David Maxwell Britt.
The next tribute is going to be for Edwin P. Friedberg, and the presenter will be Cader Howard. Cader is a graduate of Davidson College and UNC Law School. He began his practice here in Raleigh in 1972, and for a long time he's been one of the managing partners of Howard, Stallings, Fromm, and Hudson, where Ed Friedberg served as counsel for 15 years. Cader.
May it please the court, distinguished audience. I hope that in my few remarks today I can give you more occasion to laugh than to mourn. Well, my friend and occasional mentor Ed Friedberg was much about laughter. I would dare say that probably there are not a whole lot of you that knew Ed Friedberg, because even though he practiced for 61 years, his practice was rather limited to a few clients and to a few specialty areas. Let me share a little bit about his life. It's very interesting. He came down from New Jersey as a 160-pound offensive lineman on a scholarship with Coach Wallace Wade. It was the time of the Iron Dukes in the late 30s. He found out that 160-pound linemen from New Jersey didn't get along too well with 250-pound linemen from West Virginia and Pennsylvania. So his football career was admittedly somewhat short. But when Pearl Harbor occurred, he left Duke, he enlisted in the U.S. Marines, and he saw a lot of heavy action in the Pacific Island campaigns. And I think, like so many people of our parents' generation, that dramatically affected the rest of his life. Ed Friedberg, for those of you that did know him, was not afraid of anybody or anything other than perhaps his inevitable demise. And he told me on a number of occasions that the reason that he felt that way, he said, when you've been on a Pacific island with Japanese bullets coming at you, with your Marine buddies dying to your left and to your right, and in front of you and behind you, why would you now be afraid of anything? And he wasn't. Well, he finished his military service, he came back to Duke, he finished undergrad, and he got his law degree there. And he started practicing in 1948 in the town of Creedmoor. Now, we're not sure about this, we haven't verified this, but as far as we know, we think that he was the only person to ever be run out of town by the mayor and the other prominent citizens of Creedmoor. And let me explain why. And this is hard to believe, even though it was 61 years ago. He had the audacity to address a witness, an African-American witness in a criminal trial as Mr. And after that, the mayor of Creedmoor, who was also his landlord, came to him and said, Mr. Friedberg, you're going to have to get out of town. And he said, why? I won the case. He said, because you addressed that witness as Mr. But Creedmoor's loss was Wake County's gain. After a stint with the Philadelphia Tax Council Office of the Justice Department, he set up practice in Raleigh and developed a specialty of defending civil and criminal tax cases. He was the first tax lawyer in Eastern North Carolina. And that's primarily what he did for 30, 35, 40 years. And he was somewhat invincible. For decades, he didn't lose a case. Now, some people, particularly you litigators, would say the only person that ever doesn't lose a case is one that doesn't take ones he should. And we've confirmed this is the case. When he finally lost a case, enjoying losing, he purchased a horse collar of roses and sent it to the Justice Department attorney who had beaten him and said, pardon me, Your Honor, this is a quotation, you finally beat me, you SOB. My partner Alan Fromm has confirmed that recently that story actually happened. Well, he continued his practice, and we hooked up, as my introducer said, for 15 years. And what a great privilege it was to have him as my office neighbor and an occasional mentor. There's so much I could say. Let me share just a little bit of his humor about him, because that's what I will, along with his professionalism, is what I will remember Ed Friedberg for most. There was a time, and Robert Paschal just shared with me that when he was growing up, that he was very familiar with the Friedberg zip line and with the Friedberg goats. They lived on Lake Boone Trail, and they had these goats that you can see on the hillside. And one time, Ed comes home, it was during the Christmas season, and Nancy, his wife, is all excited. She says, Ed, the Baptist preacher called me, and our goats are going to be in a nativity scene. And Mr. Friedberg says, you got his number? And he called him. And he said, Reverend so-and-so, this is Edwin P. Friedberg. I understand you talked to my wife about my goats being in a nativity scene. And the Baptist preacher said, Mr. Friedberg, I want to assure you, those goats will be taken care of just like the youngest children in our congregation. They will be well cared for. And Mr. Friedberg listened to that a second, and then he said to the preacher, he says, you don't understand. These is Jewish goats, and they ain't going to be in no damn nativity scene. Ed Friedberg was indeed a very funny man. And he was not the least bit reticent about employing that humor in his professional representation. You know, I've often thought that maybe we ought to amend the rules of professional conduct to add this. A lawyer, whenever possible, shall attempt to indulge in humor. Okay? He did that. What I also will remember most about him is his professionalism and his dedication to his clients. And it could be quite unnerving and quite irritating if you were on the other side. Representation to him of a client was a holy obligation. And to him, and I don't know of any occasion where he didn't exhibit this, a lawyer was expected at all times to give everything he had to show the client his best judgment at all times. But more than that, Ed Friedberg didn't just tell his clients what they could do. he always told them what they should do. And that's one of many things that I will remember him for. We were blessed with 15 years. He made us all in our firm better lawyers. His memory still serves to make us better lawyers, and we will remember him fondly. Thank you.
Our next tribute will be to Reef C. Ivey. The presenter is Keiran Shanahan. Keiran got his undergraduate degree in business from East Carolina University and his law degree from UNC Law School. After graduating from law school, he served 5 years as an assistant U.S. attorney in North Carolina and in Georgia. He's the founding partner of Shanahan Law Group here in Raleigh, and Reef Ivey practiced with that group until his death in 2009.
Your Honor, may it please the court. Good afternoon. The hard part about this assignment is that it's impossible to explain a guy like Reef Ivey in 5 minutes. You just can't do it. But I think that he would have liked your law partner very much. He was very much that way. I spent many time in my life explaining Reef Ivey to people, I can tell you that, because he was a contradiction in many ways. He loved confrontation. That was his favorite thing to do with people. And so people, when they met him, the first reaction usually wasn't good. In fact, it was quite the contrary. He had a way of getting in your face with the truth, with what he thought, or with what he thought was the truth, was his way. But that balanced with a man of great compassion, and that's what really drove him. He was compassionate and full of passion about fairness and injustice. He wouldn't tolerate it. Reef Ivey was from Lumberton, North Carolina. He came here to Raleigh, where he went to NC State. The blood that flowed through his veins the day he died was NC State red. He went to Carolina Law School, where eventually became probably the single biggest benefactor of that school to this day. Something many people don't know about Reef. Then went on and worked in the DA's office in Manhattan, where he began his career as a prosecutor. He then was legal counsel to Champion Sporting Goods, and lived in Philadelphia. About 1990, he came home, and we started together in a firm called Pat & Bob's. He came down because he wanted to get back to North Carolina. He never lost his North Carolina roots, which was great. He became associated with NC State, served on the Centennial Authority, which oversees our sports complex, and did a great job there. But Reef Ivey was a corporate lawyer, a gentleman's lawyer. He loved the practice of law, and he loved being a lawyer, but it wasn't the law or being a lawyer that defined him. It was a part of who he was, but a small part. He was active in the community and gave generously of his time and of his resources and of his talents. But he always told people what he thought. In fact, since he's passed away, rarely does a day go by where somebody comes up to him without a Reef story. And in fact, one happened today. Someone who knew I wasn't coming here, but someone who served with Reef out at the NC State Club. He was instrumental in getting it started and served on the board. And they were having a heated discussion about whether or not they should make the members wear a jacket at the NC State Club after 4 o'clock. And Reef was very much in favor of we should wear a jacket. Well, an individual by the name of Bobby Lewis, I'm sure everyone might be telling the story. He's 15 years a clothier here in Raleigh, and a great guy. And said, he gave a passionate remark about, I'm in the clothes, Reef. I know, and please, you got to trust me on this. And Reef looks at him and says, well, look at the way you're dressed. I don't think you should be in clothes for 15 years. But he loved the guy to death, and that's how he was. Now, in the offices that I worked with him at, he had this propensity for being totally inappropriate with folks. He would tell the women who came in how they dressed, or how they should be dressing, what he liked about them, what he didn't like about them. I'd pull him to the side and say, Reef, you know, have you ever heard of the EEOC? We can't be talking to employees the way you did. No, I understand it, I get it. And then the next day, someone would walk in and he would tell somebody they just should be dressing differently. But what we did in an effort to sort of educate Reef was a lot of our clients in the business world, we put on these little seminars in-house to teach them about appropriate things to do and not to do in the workplace. So we asked Reef to teach the class. Well, the clients loved it, and he had a great presentation. So I sat in on it one day, and he did about 4 or 5 anecdotes about what not to do in the workplace, and they were all things that he had done. So that was Reef. He was just a wonderful human being. And let me tell you this, that people that knew him at first and oftentimes had a wrong impression, after he got to know you, he was wonderful. A couple things I don't think you mind sharing, but Reef was one of these secret givers in life. He had families that he helped that no one knew about, nor did he want people to know about. He gave generously in so many different ways, and yet he was a quiet giver. Didn't like people to know what he was doing. And that's just the way he was. Above all, he loved his family. He could have had a stack of plaques to himself, awards that he received in his life. His office was covered with pictures of his family, drawings that he had done, because that was Reef Ivey. One other thing I'd like to share with you, when he was 22, he was afflicted with the first type of cancer. He had one of 5 cancers that Reef Ivey carried. He beat 40, the last one he got. The guy seized every day of his life. He never complained about it. He would have chemotherapy in the morning. He was in the office in the afternoon. Sometimes we tried to send him home, but he wouldn't go home. He was just that kind of guy. He loved whatever he was doing and wherever he was. One thing he always wanted to be was a litigator. He was a corporate guy. I mean, Reef was the type of guy that on Monday would close a $100 million deal for a Fortune 500 company. Tuesday, he'd be in district court doing a traffic ticket. And he was happy doing both of them. And he put his heart and soul into all of them, but he really wanted to be a litigator. So occasionally we would let him litigate. We took him to court in front of Judge Jolly in our business court one day, and it was a class action suit, so it was a courtroom full of lawyers and different parties. The judge was going around welcoming the lawyers and being very gracious, Judge Jolly is, and he turns to Mr. Ivey and he says, "Mr. Ivey, what brings you to court today? Are you going to help litigate?" And he said, "No, Your Honor, I'm just here for power and influence." Power and influence. So I think I turned red and said that. Judge Jolly enjoyed it, and we ultimately made Reef an honorary litigator, which was great. And about a year ago, we actually had a conference room that we dedicated to Reef, and his presence, and how impactful he's been to our firm with so many people. We brought in his friends and his colleagues, and he stood up and said, "I thought you had to die before they'd have something named after you." Was his remarks at his little party that we had for him. And so we just miss him every day. And I learned from him by his graciousness, his willingness to confront, but doing it out of a spirit of compassion, caring about fairness and decrying injustice. And so I was grateful to have him in my life. He lives on, and to him that I think being remembered for the kindness that he bestowed on people, even though he did it in a unique and different way. Those people that were touched by his life are for the better. And I was so glad to call him part of it.
Next tribute is for James E. Long. Presentation will be by Judge John Jack B. Lewis Jr. And Judge Lewis got his A.B. degree and law degree from UNC Chapel Hill. Before going on the bench, he was in the law firm of Lewis and Rouse. I think he was there until 1982. And since that time, he served as a Superior Court judge as well as serving on the North Carolina Court of Appeals.
James Eugene Long. That few people are able to combine doing what they want to do and their work, as was he. Jimmy Long, as he was known in Burlington, was a man who loved his work, loved his family loved him. He was seldom deprived of a good meal or a delightful libation. He was a real people person. His was a talent for public service. He enjoyed, unlike some of us who have been in public service, he enjoyed campaigning. But he did once lose an election, only one, his first for commissioner, possibly because his opponent was from the same place as our state zoological establishment. And Jimmy just didn't carry the zoo vote the first time. That being done, he became the commissioner of insurance, and as such, he became the fire marshal for the state of North Carolina. It might have been the North Carolina State Fire Marshal for his devotion to that place. However, his red tie was not for State College. It was because his father also wore a red tie every day to work. Every child of my generation and his anxiously awaited, as we grew up, the arrival of Santa Claus in a parade with bands and floats, clowns and balloons. And Santa Claus, who himself arrived on the biggest State College red fire engine that could be found, and who also loved to ride the biggest State College fire engine that could be found, the State Fire Marshal, Jimmy Long. He infrequently threw candy from the fire engine, but everybody knew who wore the State Fire Marshal's uniform. Another part of his work was to receive the annual request and auto insurance filings, and to consider the not infrequent requests for increases in those. His predecessor had a habit of rejecting every request for a rate increase. And as it was said, Jimmy is said to have said there were 1,000 appeals and he won one. So Jimmy arranged to talk to the people. Only 6 of the appeals from 1984 to 2008 ever got to court. Every year these things came, but they were mostly settled before they got to hearing. And they were all 6 settled by the time they got into hearing. There was a conciliatory feeling about the man. He realized that you can win without bashing the other side. And he did. At one public hearing, word got out that a large group from Cumberland County were coming to oppose any rate increase that might be suggested. And they were coming in uniform. Well, who should meet them at the hearing but the State Fire Marshal in uniform? There were a great many salutes rendered and a great many returned, and most of the people left happy. Jim's father was also a lawyer, as was mine. Jim and his father served in the legislature and obviously got along well. Jim and I learned early on from the voices of experience that a good lawyer must know the law, know the facts, and secure your fee. Otherwise, you get to know firsthand what pro bono means. They also told us, always carry a pen. Somebody might want to write you a check. Jimmy worked hard and enjoyed it. He enjoyed it. When he was working for the Mickey Company, back when lawyers used to use books, we met many times socially and professionally. In fact, it was Jimmy who introduced me to single malt scotch, something that he found delightful and which I too enjoyed. I'm glad that was before the Ethics Commission came along. At any rate, I'm glad the statute of limitations has run. During my career as a naval war hero, as Mr. Churchill said, the most exhilarating thing in life is to be shot at and missed. However, I can gratefully say that having been on an aircraft carrier, even though it was Vietnam, I was never, to my knowledge, shot at. But later in the reserves, Al Adams and Craig Brenson and Bill Watson and I went to San Francisco on Navy duty tough stuff that was. We had to be sure there was no invasion from that side. One evening, while we were checking out the safety of the Buena Vista Irish coffee shop, Al looked up from our booth at the glass outside, and whose noses should be pressed against the glass but Jimmy Long and Big. So we beckoned to them to come in. They joined us. We all partook of Irish coffee, and we left the bay safe, rode the cable cars back up the hill, and went back to our respective duties. His loyalty to work and to his friends is legend, illustrated in part by this incident. When he was first elected and sworn in as commissioner in 1984, he was sworn in by Mr. Justice Earl Vaughan. In 2008, in one of his last appointments, Jimmy appointed Earl Vaughan's daughter, Rose Vaughan Williams, to be the Insurance Commission's legislative counsel. She was and is excellent. This quote from Dr. Oliver Wendell Holmes, not the justices, Bob, to me illustrates Jim's view of life and of work. He said, "I find the great thing in this world is not so much where we stand as in what direction we're moving. To reach the port of heaven, we must sail sometimes with the wind and sometimes against it. But we must sail and not drift or lie at anchor." In closing, I will recall getting to know Jimmy and his parents in Burlington when some 45 years ago I married one of his neighbors, Keiran. They played in the same sand pile, innocently, I'm told. Jimmy's father, George Long, married his mother, Helen Long. Thus, a Long married a Long. I would not be surprised to learn that O'Connell is Gaelic for long. And so you can now understand Jimmy's campaign slogans. Make it long and keep it long is a family tradition. He gave us much in memory to consider his work and his life. He taught us a great deal. And even in death, he gave us a lesson. In some respects, what to do and what to avoid. He was a very good, extraordinary man, and I'm pleased to say, my friend. Thank you.
Our next tribute is to Bruce N. Metz, Sr., and the presenter will be his daughter, Sally. Sally got her undergraduate degree in political science from UNC Wilmington and subsequently got her law degree from UNC Chapel Hill. The first 5 years, she had the pleasure of practicing law with her father, and along the way she had gotten a nursing degree and decided in 1982 that she wanted to practice that noble profession, and that's what she's doing now. So we're pleased to have Sally, her dad.
That's my dad. And I couldn't think of any better way to try to show you who he is, except that's Daddy in his little law suit ready to go to work. My dad liked to blow stuff up. He was never happier than when something was exploding. I don't know what other girls learn from their daddies, but I learned stuff that the DSS would take us away for nowadays. He taught me how to fire a pistol, fire a rifle, saw off a shotgun, shoot that shotgun, and make a Molotov cocktail and throw that Molotov cocktail without losing a body part. Daddy loved to fish, and he also taught me that in the event the fish weren't biting, you could always get some fish if you just lobbed an M80 into the water first. Daddy also schooled me in the fine art of making acetylene bombs. My daddy was a welder before he went to law school. He learned a very helpful fact when he was a welder, and that was that acetylene and oxygen, when combined, is very combustible. So we lived back in the woods, back where nobody could see us, and he would fill a big balloon full of acetylene and oxygen, put a big old fuse on the bottom of it, light that sucker and send it up. It was a work of art. It was a work of art. First you'd see this flash, and then you'd hear this boom and the ground would just shake. He loved it. He would just bend over laughing, watching something blow up. Well, like I said, we lived back in the woods, and one time the Summit County Sheriff, we were in Akron, Ohio, living in Akron, Ohio at the time. Summit County Sheriff comes tooling down our long gravel driveway. We hear him coming, and he finds Daddy puttering around the garage, wondering out loud if maybe the Russians did finally indeed decide to attack Akron, Ohio. He never got caught blowing things up. Daddy loved fireworks, and he loved them 365 days a year. He used to set them off with my husband, Doug. Had a good time blowing stuff up then. We were living in Akron, and we lived next to a cornfield, and one day Daddy's bottle rocket caught the neighbor's cornfield on fire. It took us an hour stomping out those smoldering corn stalks to get the fire put out, but no harm was really done. He also liked aeronautics, and he had a really weird sense of humor, as you might imagine. We had little chickens running around the yard, and one day Daddy decided that he was going to make a little harness, picked up one of our hapless little roosters, put him in the harness, and then had a kite, a big inflatable kite. Where he got this, I don't know. He attached the rooster to the kite. Up went the rooster, little heads bobbing, and up he goes. It's doing great. The string breaks. There goes the rooster over the trees, into the scorched cornfield. Well, I took my golden retriever, went off across the field and retrieved the chicken. He was fine. But that's my dad. This is the kind of stuff he did. He loved riding toys, motorcycles, mini bikes, ATVs, you name it, my dad loved it. And we had it. One of my earliest memories is sitting in the front of a motorcycle. Not the back, but the front. I was that little, with this enormous helmet on my head, driving around the neighborhood. And when I got bigger, he put me on the back. We would ride for hours, just hours. So sometimes so long, I would be freezing by the time we got home. Well, Daddy always talked about a gyrocopter, and I don't know if y'all know what a gyrocopter is. This is my dad. It's like a go-kart with a propeller and a tail. It's got a little engine. It's a one-man flying contraption. He talked about that from the time I was tiny. Well, he moved to Maui for a while, which is where he met his wife, Ivey, and he finally got him a gyrocopter. So it took months, worked on this thing for months. And I didn't see this, because I was in Ohio, or else North Carolina at the time. Well, Daddy gets up and was excited to make his maiden voyage. Up he goes, down he crashes. The thing fell apart in pieces, and he would never speak of it again. I only heard it from my siblings, because Daddy wouldn't talk about it. He was just so mad that he crashed his little gyrocopter. Well, Daddy was a prosecutor right out of law school. Later on, he became an author, a published author. He wrote for the Ohio Revised Code, and also a well-known criminal defense attorney. And according to my father, every one of his clients were unfortunate but upstanding people who had either been wrongly accused, horribly unlucky, or perhaps just simply not who or where they'd been reported to be at the time of the crime. He took a fiendish delight in putting the state to its proof, and he often won acquittals in cases that people thought were lost from the start. And as Clark said, I practiced with Dad from about 96 to about 2000. And I ended up, when he first came to me, I called him. He lived in California at the time. I called him for months, begging him to come out, practice with me, because I was a newbie on my own. And he finally did. He finally came out, and we had a really good time. But he developed a very close relationship with my son, who was a baby at the time. Little Sam was probably, I don't know, a year and a half maybe. And Dad would get Sam up often in the middle of the night when he was awake and nobody else was. And we'd take him outside and sit him on the couch, and they'd watch cartoons. And Daddy would instruct Sam on the sophisticated nuances of the humor of the Three Stooges and Bugs Bunny. And they would watch the Coyote and Roadrunner and root for the coyote. They always enjoyed stuff like that. He would slip Sammy chocolate when he thought I wasn't looking. And later on, he would just cheer Sam on at the soccer sidelines. And when they lost, which was more often than not, he just ignored the losses. Daddy was a self-taught musician. He played piano, clarinet, trumpet, saxophone. And when Sam, my son, was 11, he developed an interest in music. And so Dad and he bonded over the saxophone. Well, Daddy picked up quite quickly that my son was rhythm impaired. The boy had no rhythm. And it became his mission in life to teach this kid some rhythm. So it took him months and a metronome, but finally Sam got it. And he actually last year, he won an award for best student in the band class. Well, one day Daddy and I went fishing, and we went without the M80s this time. We were rowing the boat out in the middle of Lake Benson out there in Garner. We were rowing out there, and I said to Daddy, Daddy, are you any good at putting worms on the hook? He said, I'm good at that. I said, Daddy, are you really good at putting worms on the hook? He looked at me kind of funny. He said, yeah, I'm really good at that. And I said, well, Daddy, then you can be the master baiter. He loved that joke. And my daddy repeated that joke every so often for the rest of his life. He thought that was the funniest thing. Well, thank you for letting me reminisce. It was been fun to tell you some stories and kind of share who my dad was, other than a lawyer that you might have known down here at the courthouse. When we lost him, I lost my very most trusted advisor. But I'm hoping someday to see him again. And as my daddy always said, one never knows who won. Thank you.
Our next tribute is to Harry E. Paschal, and the presenter will be Robert C. Paschal. Robert is a law partner of mine at Young Boy Henderson, where he's practiced since 1978. He got his BA degree from UNC Chapel Hill and his law degree from Duke. Robert is also the nephew of Mr. Paschal, and therefore is here representing the family.
Glad to have the opportunity to meet with y'all today. Edward's family is in Washington, D.C. He's got a son and a daughter-in-law who is having one of those miracle pregnancies in her 40s and is very pregnant, will do any day. And the doc said, stay put. So Edward's wife is in Washington, D.C. with them, and I'm delighted to be here. Edward was one of 10 children of a classics professor at Wake Forest College. And they all went to Wake Forest, lived downtown near the seminary. The house is still there. Just have fond memories of growing up. And just this year, the last of the 10 died. So it's a sad time for me. Edward is hard to characterize. Like Mr. Friedberg, World War II really shaped his life. He was in the first wave of Utah Beach on D-Day. And if you've read Stephen Ambrose's book about Teddy Roosevelt with the cane tapping on the helmets of young soldiers who had buried their heads in the sand, he had an ascot on, the general did. And Edward was one of those, scared to death at 6:30 in the morning. With that tapping on his helmet, he looked up and saw the general and said, if he can stand up, I can get across this beach. And he did, got shot 3 times that day. He was the toughest guy I ever met. I played high school football, wasn't real good, but was pretty big, and I could shake hands with Edward when I was 18, and he could make my knees buckle. He was just a strong, strong man. He was a great soldier, a great shot. He was a terrific hunter, and he didn't get married until his 40s, and so a lot of my upbringing, he was a frequent bachelor, but he was very shy, and I think the war did that to him. He practiced by himself. From a claim to fame perspective as an attorney, it was real estate. And Northern Lake County and Granville counties, if you couldn't figure out how to make a transaction work, you went to see Edwin. And he had an encyclopedic knowledge of real estate transactions. And he was just a fascinating individual. Got married in his 40s, had a child late, and that's what his son has done. He had brothers and sisters that were lawyers. But he just loved his family, but he was a very quiet guy. We would have Thanksgiving dinner here at our house in Raleigh, and you just couldn't get Edwin from Wake Forest to Raleigh on Thanksgiving. He just wouldn't do it. He just loved to stay home, but loved his family. So I think, as I look at y'all today, Edward was just totally different from anybody we've talked about today. A very shy and quiet man, but was very, very smart and loved his family, and was a true member of the greatest generation to whom we owe a lot of respect and admiration. So I thank you for listening, and just proud to be here on Edwin's behalf today.
I'd like to thank all the presenters, as has always been the case in the past. We learn a lot, we appreciate a lot. There's so much about our fellow lawyers that we don't know about, and I always go away from these services with an appreciation for what the lawyers do, and the joy they can have, the fun they can have, but then the other serious things that they engage in. Some people I'd like to thank. First, the video person that is here today is Jay Schmidt. He's filling in for Merit Video Works. They weren't able to get here, so Jay is here. His business is NC Studio Pro. We still have, for court reporting purposes, Worley Reporting is here again to help us out, and Linda Garrett is the lady who is helping with that. And as is always true with something like this, you can't do it without a lot of people helping. And one thing that the Memorials Committee has always had is an excellent group of committee members, and we have some who have served a long time. We are sort of seeing about the new direction with Lenny having retired, but more especially with Betty Jo Creed having had to retire along with Lenny. But we're seeing what we can do. But I would like to add, rather than read, you've got the program, you have the list of the people on the Memorials Committee, but I would like to ask those that are here to stand, and I think it would be good to give them a because we appreciate having Ed and Doug here on behalf of the Bar Association of the 10th Judicial District. And finally, I would like to thank Chief Judge Donnie Stevens, who always works with this committee very well. He could not be here, but we are well served with Judge Michael with an L, Morgan, and we appreciate his honoring us by being here today, and I will turn it back to him.
Mr. Brewer, thank you very much for your kind remarks. I will pass them on to Judge Stevens. Thank you for your dedicated leadership of the Memorials Committee. And again, as is always the case, the dedications and the tributes that are made are always insightful, always uplifting, and always enriching as they help all of us to understand that although we're very busy in our respective professions and walks in life, especially those of us that happen to be in the legal profession, there's a human quality that we all share, and it's important in times like these to remember that. So thank you, Mr. Brewer. Thanks to the Memorials Committee. Thanks as well to the presidents of the respective bar organizations here for their capable leadership as well, and also allowing our court system to serve as the venue for these very appropriate and meaningful ceremonies as we remember those who have gone on. They're gone. At this time, Mr. Bailiff will be in recess, signing out.
All rise. Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. This Honorable Superior Court Special Proceeding for the County of Wake now stands adjourned. Signing die. Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. God save the state, Son of